It is time now for our State House Insiders. Antoine Seawright, our Democratic strategist, Dave Wilson, our Republican strategist. As the end of the legislative session nears, the Senate taking up the budget, passing their version of the budget last night, but it differs from the House version, guys, particularly $500 million in property tax relief that the House wants that the Senate did not include. What's going to happen next here, guys? Antoine, we'll begin with you.
Well, this is normal. This is par for the course, as they say in golf. The House and the Senate very rarely agree that both people belong in the same building. So nevertheless, you should not expect them to agree on something as monumental and important as the budget, particularly in an election year where South Carolina has some healthy money to play with. So they will battle it out in the conference committee that will be split between House members and Senate members. And it's all about jockeying for position, and it's all about trading. Give up something to get something. Now, I think at the end of the day, because it's dominated by Republicans, most people are going to agree that returning money to the taxpayers is going to be this notion that Republicans will advocate for the sake of many of them have competitive primaries and they want to come back to serve another term.
The other thing that you're looking at, JR, is the fact that there are 170 members of the legislature, 124 in the House, 46 in the Senate. But the decision about what's going to be in that consolidated budget is going to come down to 6 people, 2 Republicans and a Democrat from the House and 2 Republicans and a Democrat from the Senate. Those 6 people are going to basically get into a room and hammer out how we're going to spend upwards of close to $15 billion in South Carolina in the next fiscal year, which starts July 1st.
As we mentioned, time is running out on this year's session. 2 weeks left now. Dave, what's next on the agenda for lawmakers? What will they try to push through between now and the end of the session?
There are some Republicans who are trying to push through a transgender bill right now over in the Senate. But, folks, there are only 6 days of the legislative session left, and that is it for what's going to be happening, with the exception of what will possibly happen with the governor's vetoes. So when we look at that going on, it is not a whole lot of time left. And keep in mind, when this legislative session ends, every member of the House and every member of the Senate is up for re-election this year. So we're going to have a whole new group of people coming in next year with possibly a whole lot of new ideas of laws that we should be passing in 2025.
If you've ever been a student, you would have an appreciation for the fact the closer we get to the end of school, the more aggressive we try to get our work done to prove to the teacher we deserve to be promoted. And I think the General Assembly concept is very applicable in that nature. Look for some sort of judicial reform to attempt to take place. I do believe that is a hot topic of conversation, and then further conversation on what happens to the $1.8 billion mystery money that Dave deposited into the state's account between he and JR with their vacation money. So look to see what happens with that money, because I think that is a deep concern among Republican and Democratic lawmakers. And I think the public is starting to tune in to figure out where the money came from, and better yet, how it can be used for the sake of benefiting South Carolina.
JR, I think what Antoine hasn't figured out is that we wouldn't be here right now if we had, absconded away with $1.8 billion. But that being the case, the real question that has come down, which we have not had a chance to talk about between basketball and golf over the last few weeks, is there's money that's in an account somewhere that is not accounted for. And you've had the Treasurer's office pointing at the Comptroller General's office, and the Comptroller General pointing at the Treasurer, and the state Senate took the Treasurer to task the other week, basically raking him up and down the coals and saying, "You're the bank of the state. What happened to this money?" That's going to be a real question that's going to have to be answered, and it's probably going to be what we see and talk about during the off session once session ends next week after next.
Is anybody going to lose their job over this, Antoine?
I don't know if they'll lose their job, because the Comptroller General and all those folks were duly elected by the people. But I do think lawmakers are going to figure out how to hold folks accountable for their actions. And I think furthermore, it's going to elevate the conversation around some sort of qualifications for certain people to be in certain roles. At the end of the day, $1.8 billion is not $1.80. That's a lot of money when you think about a state like South Carolina who has generational needs. This is a tremendous opportunity, as written by Congressman Clapper in the Post and Courier, to repair some long-term broken faults in the state, to do things like healthcare, education, roads, bridges, infrastructure, all those things. And so jockeying for this money next year will be certainly a big part of the conversation, but accountability this year is going to suck up much of the oxygen going into these last 6 days or so.
But it is, this $1.8 billion is not just floating funny money that's sitting out there. It has been allocated. They just don't know where it's been used or put yet. And that's the big question at hand right now.
All right, Curtis Loftus, so the state treasurer, guys, he says basically lawmakers aren't serious about finding solutions about this $1.8 billion account. They want to point the finger, play the blame game. And he has basically said his office is not at fault here.
Well, it's easier to say that when you're under the gun, and it's easier to point blame at other folks who are trying to hold you accountable. I have nothing to say directly towards his comments, but what I will say is that certain people have certain jobs. We all play a role on the team. If the people of South Carolina elected folks to do their job, then the expectation is for them to execute the jobs and deal with things that fall under that umbrella. This $1.8 billion is the responsibility of someone, yet to be determined who the someone is.
And that's what a forensic report's going to end up doing. Somebody's going to have to start digging into the books and finding out exactly how this money has been allocated, where it belongs, and is it available to actually be used by the General Assembly next year. That's a lot of money, JR.
All right, Dave Wilson, Antoine Seawright, guys, as usual, thank you so very much for your time. And for more